Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Shield Vulnerable, Untold Stories. I am super pumped up, super excited about today's guest. With us here today, I have Natalie Salinas. Salinas?
Salinas, yeah.
Salinas. Okay, I did know that, but I butcher it sometimes. Natalie is the A21 U.S. Reach Coordinator for their organization. A21 is devoted to bringing awareness and an end to human trafficking. They are one of our main charities here at Pursuit Pathways. This is going to be an awesome discussion with Natalie. Her and I have talked a lot about this topic already before. It's something that I have a passion for. It's a big part of our vision. It's something I know that she completely loves the work that she does. Natalie, you're a mom. You said you were an unintentional soccer mom. You said yourself you were never competitive, but you found yourself thrown into this big, huge soccer world kind of outside your work. But on top of that, too, you are passionate. You're passionate about supporting local organizations outside of A21. I know that you're a very giving, very charitable person, which is amazing. So welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. This is going to be such a valuable podcast for everybody listening.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited just to get to be a part of this and to connect with your audience.
Yeah, that's amazing. Listen, I have a passion for these topics. Passions on exploitation, passions about trafficking. It's a big backbone. It's a big part of the work that we do in providing companies and organizations awareness training for prevention, and tying a lot of it back to employee engagement and employee wellness. Natalie is based out of Texas. And I want to talk right here, Natalie, right away about the prevalence of people. And this isn't an immigration topic, right? PSA warning for everybody. This is not about the topic of immigration. Okay. This is about the prevalence of people who are being transported into other countries or into the USA for the recruitment and purposes of trafficking, whether it be sex trafficking, labor trafficking, or anything else. Let's talk about that. What are you seeing? You're based in Texas. Yeah. You're right in the heart of borderland.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's really important first in jumping into this to identify the differences between human trafficking and human smuggling, because I think that's a definite thing that's kind of gets mixed up and people may not know the differences between the two. So human trafficking is the illegal trade of human beings for the use of their body and or for labor. And the key factors in this definition is it's through force, fraud, or coercion. Those three aspects and components have to be found in the case to be able to charge somebody as a trafficker of human trafficking. The only caveat is that when you're dealing with a minor, somebody under the age of 18, kids cannot consent to sex, right? And so we don't have to prove that in a court of law.
Right.
That is, so I think that's important to acknowledge, let's identify what human trafficking is first.
And then now let's talk about the smuggling.
Yeah. So human smuggling is, it involves a provision of a service. So usually it's an individual who voluntarily is seeking to gain a legal entry into a foreign country, maybe for the purposes of work, maybe to transport false, fraudulent documents, maybe to transport some illegal trade. And so it's usually a voluntary aspect where they're needing to be smuggled in. So there are differences between the two. And the important thing when you're thinking about human trafficking is to remember those three words: force, fraud, and coercion.
Right. Let's talk about this here for a second, because when somebody is trafficked, right, you have the force, fraud, and coercion, right? Those elements have to be present unless it's a child under the age of 18. Somebody smuggling is somebody who has volunteered or at least by their own free will has made the decision to take part in this, right? And now they're being, there's international smuggling, right? Which means that they're going across a border.
Mm-hmm.
But when we take somebody away from their support system, and now they may find themselves in a country where they intentionally went there to do work or do a job or, see something through, their likelihood is going to increase that they then can fall into the hands of a trafficker. They came there intentionally, with a
Mm-hmm.
purpose. But once that is completed, what are you seeing then when it comes to that same person who is compliant now being forced into this,
Mm-hmm.
fraudulently pushed into this, or coerced into now becoming a trafficking victim? Again, sexual
For sure.
trafficking, labor trafficking. What's happening, right? There's definitely something there
Yeah.
that can happen.
For sure. And I think one big trend that we are seeing is recruitment through false job advertisements. That is a
Yeah.
huge trend. And it's on reputable websites where you and I would look for a job. A lot of times it is people just wanting to come over to the United States or wherever and find a job to create a better life for their family and their kids. And it starts off that way. But you answer to the wrong job ad. And in turn, once you get over here, maybe you're the trafficker who you think is going to be your new employee or employer, is helping you come over to the United States. And then once you get here, you find out that that person is now trafficking, wanting to traffic you. So what
Right.
they do is a lot of times, once they transport the person from one country to another, in the false job ad that they answered to start working at a job is then it's called bonded labor. And what that is you're essentially needing to pay back your now trafficker for helping you get across the border, for helping you get your paperwork, maybe a green card, whatever the case may be. And then you don't have any resources or family or friends there. So you're having to live wherever they provide. You're having to eat food that they're providing for you. So all of these things and resources that they're giving you, you're having to then pay back. So it's all deducted from whatever job that they have you working in. So essentially, you never work your way out of debt.
Right. You stay in that form of debt bondage all the time. It's always accumulating. There's always something there, right? And when you said like a lot of one thing that happens in those cases too, right? You come over and I confiscate your passport, your ID, everything that you had to be able to get away, right? And those threats and the coercion begins right away,
Yeah.
forcing people, right? Natalie, I paid for you to come over here from whatever country you came from. I paid for your airplane ticket. I paid for your hotels. I've paid for your meals right now. You owe this money back to us. And it
Mm-hmm.
just starts. It's that first domino to fall. What industries are you seeing this like very common in, like that it's happening or that people are being forced into labor situations or other forms of trafficking?
Yeah, so we are seeing a high percentage that are working in agricultural spaces and sectors, and it's definitely something where the trafficker can help get this person that they're trying to, the victim, over to the United States through a visa, a work visa, essentially, right? But the trafficker is the employer. I'm going to get that right one day. He's the employer. And so that trafficker is now tied to the visa because they're responsible for bringing that person over and putting them to work and getting them that work visa. So we're seeing a lot of agricultural labor trafficking happening. I did want to highlight, though, that the false job ads are not just to get people into trap people in labor trafficking. It's
Yeah.
also being used to trap people in sex trafficking scenarios. And this is girls, boys, men, women. It's not tied to any one gender or even age. And so the work visas are definitely a huge trend that we're seeing, and it's unfortunate because it is tied to the trafficker. I do want to say that we do our best to work alongside Department of Labor and Homeland Security where we do work, and there are good strides happening to be able to monitor and pay close attention to these situations and making sure that we're taking appropriate actions to protect those people. And so, a lot of times, like what our organization does is we do deal with a lot of foreign nationals, and we have the opportunity to be that safe space for them in time
Right.
of transition when they're recovered from a trafficking scenario. And so we're able to come alongside them, offer them protection in partnership with the government, in partnership with law enforcement, to get them the help and resources they need, and then help repatriate them back to wherever it is that they is a safe place. Maybe it's back home to their home country. Maybe it's another location that they're trying to get to. And so we have the opportunity to come alongside them as they're navigating that process. Because it's a very scary process whenever you're in a new country and you don't know what the laws are. You don't know what your rights are. And you came over in a very fortunate circumstance.
I know we said we weren't going to go down the immigration road, but I'm going to here because I think it's so relevant here, because we're talking about an employer who has gone through the immigration visa for this person. And so an individual is presumably not entering the country illegally. They're coming over under the guise that they are going to be given an employment visa. And then that doesn't happen. So where and how, walk me through this. You're just talking about Department of Homeland Security and everything else. Walk me through this and identifying those. And you know what is, let's say, what is ICE doing when it comes to finding people who maybe now they're in the country illegally, but they believe that they were coming there legally for the purposes of work? And how is this going to completely come full circle with now trying to identify human trafficking rings and saying, you are not here legally, and then the story's got to come out of how they ended up here and saying, well, this person's the one that sponsored me or brought me over here, and I was supposed to be given a visa. Mm-hmm. I know it's a slippery slope. I know we weren't going to go down the immigration road here, but I think there's such an important aspect here that we can talk about.
Yeah, it is a very complex problem.
Yeah.
And it's not on any one entity or one organization. It honestly, to find a solid solution, we have to come together and support one another.
Yes.
And for the greater good of these vulnerable people that are coming in. Now, not everyone that's coming in to the United States may be coming in for the right reasons, but that's with everything, right? This is such a massive issue. There are always going to be bumps in the road, holes in the system, balls dropped, when you're dealing with something of this magnitude. So I always want to start off with, we have to look at it through eyes of having a little bit of grace.
Yes.
And getting a deeper understanding of the overall issue. And it does take working together. So that's why when I say coming alongside Department of Labor, there are things in protocols that they're wanting to put in place, and they're putting in place to be able to better monitor who these employers are and what their intent is, and are they following all the rules that they're supposed to? Are they offering that safe work environment? And so one of the things that we do as an organization is we'll come alongside these people and say, hey, from a human trafficking perspective, these are some resources that we can give you and help support you to make sure that you are providing a safe work environment. Now, there's always going to be the people that they just don't have good intentions, and they're running, operations that are illegal and not running their businesses right. And that's what these other entities, Homeland Security, Department of Labor, are supposed to come in and do and help monitor those, right? What we focus on is how can we support it educating as many people as possible. This is businesses, this is the transportation industry, this is hospitality industry. There's so many components, and it really takes all of us coming together to know how to identify red flags, what to look out for, and then how to report it. Because this is a hidden crime in plain sight.
Oh, and it is. I tell people
it's growing.
When people when you leave your house today and you got a 10-minute, 15-minute, 30-minute commute to work, whatever it may be, you've driven past it. It's
Yeah.
highly, highly, highly likely you've driven past it, whether it's from a labor perspective, sex trafficking, it doesn't matter. And right now we're talking about this on an international level, but it's a domestic thing too, right? You don't,
sure.
and oftentimes, right, people take a movie, Sound of Freedom, fantastic movie, but it's not like people need to understand human trafficking is not that kidnapping of a child or of an adult, forcefully putting them into a shipping container and sending them overseas. It can be as simple as it's happening in your own backyard. Traffickers are sitting there grooming prospective people, right? And we'll get into a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
But it's a domestic thing too. And so people need to realize, and I talk about this with child exploitation, I talk about this with trafficking, even, when we get into workplace violence, people are 1 or 2 degrees at most removed from knowing somebody, whether you realize it or not, who has been exploited or forcefully put into a position. Right. Or knowing somebody who knows somebody, right? You know somebody, and it's a family member of theirs that they've had. And the deeper I get into this work too, it's so funny how many people you talk to and come out and, once you build that relationship, you're like, you know what? I got to tell you something. My cousin, my whatever, right? My brother, my spouse, right? When they grew up, they were, and it's so prevalent. And so when we're talking to workplaces, right, and helping, we got to educate people, right? I'm gonna call out the elephant in the room here, right? For all of the, I don't care whether you're a C-suite, high-ranking executive, or the whatever, you're the run-in-the-mail guy through the office building, okay? The education isn't just about making people aware about watching out for red flags or how to recognize people. Part of the mission here too is educating people to know that if you're taking part in this, you are contributing to it. Okay. I have spoken to people, right? I worked through, this in my law enforcement career too. And I've talked to people who have partaken in the purchase of services of somebody for sexual purpose. And they don't realize everything that goes into it. They're just thinking about themselves in that moment. Yeah. Right. And that's part of the awareness we're trying to create is people understand when you do this, you're messing with somebody's life and you're contributing to a global issue. Yeah. And that's got to be part of the awareness too, is just not helping people recognize somebody, but helping people understand that if you're taking part in this, you're contributing.
Well, let me drop a little bomb, because I don't want those people to feel like excluded, like we're, picking on them, right? Obviously, it is true. What you're saying, it is true. They're contributing to it, not knowing. A lot of us do that. We contribute to things. We give our money toward things that we don't know, know and realize that it's not a fair trade situation, that we're there. It's not a fair labor situation, right? And so really all of us are guilty of it. And I mean, you think about all of the electronics that we all have, right?
You're right. Yeah.
You think about all of the clothing that we purchase, the food that is being provided and put in the grocery stores. It is inundated in how we function on a day-to-day basis.
It is like a huge one, right?
Yeah.
The batteries for phones, right? You just held up your phone. I know there's a lot of other things, right? But you look at like the lithium batteries that go into them, right? And the mining of that and everything, like you are right. We're all guilty of it.
Yeah. And this is not to put blame on any people, right? This is a part of the education of it all. It's now that we know, oh my gosh, that all of these items that I'm using, I'm contributing to it. Now, obviously, it is probably nearly impossible for us just to go cold turkey. We are not going to support any of these companies and use any of these supplies or whatever it is, technology. It's impossible because it's what makes us function in the world, right? It helps us function. I think what we can do is be more aware of what we are giving our money to and consciously maybe decide, I'm going to start using this instead of this. And it's those little baby steps, right?
Right.
Because if we all are educated on what we're pouring into and we all take those little baby steps, that's where big impact happens. On the flip side, the awareness aspect is also really key. So as long as we're educating ourselves and helping educate and resource others, we're helping prevent it from happening, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think a huge statistic is that really I talk about this all the time, and it still kind of blows my mind to think about the magnitude of this issue. It brings in $236 billion every year. Human trafficking alone.
Right. Yeah.
That stat a year and a half ago was at 150 billion.
So, and the statistics are the financial side, right? It's hard to actually, I think, put a number to it because last year I was involved in some work and discussions with NASDAQ Verifin and talking about the human financial toll on crime globally. And it's a $3.1 trillion year, not trafficking, but global crime, financial crime.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and there's, their stats were, I think it's 330 or $340 billion when it comes to trafficking. And, I really started diving into this and looking at it last year and going, okay, Homeland Security reports this, FBI reports this, right? I truly think, Natalie, I don't even know if we can figuratively quantify what that number is because that means that of every single, and you're making your best guess that for every one that we know about, that there's 10 more or 20 more to be able to even put a dollar figure onto it. Because I bet you that number is
greater.
Far greater, double, triple, quadruple, right? And then what is actually reported, especially now if you want to peel back the layers of, well, look at the clothes that we wear or the devices that we hold. Somewhere along the way, there's a supply chain there.
For sure.
That is where somebody is working and forced into having to do this work.
Yeah,
I think where do we what's
I'm
the
right
line
there
in the
with
sand?
you. I think that obviously, because this is a hidden in plain sight crime, this is any stat you see out there is only a stat of numbers based off what we know, based off calls and tips that are made to the National Human Trafficking Hotline or to the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. It's how many traffickers we're charging and putting in jail. It's only based off what we know, right?
Right.
So a lot of times people will ask for stats. So I think it's helpful to share stats that are out there, but it's always important. I always try to let people know there's this stat out there, which is a huge number, but this is only based off what we know. So whatever this is, the number is actually greater than this.
It is.
And it helps people wrap their mind around the magnitude of this issue.
Right. And I'm going to say this too. So from a previous investigator standpoint and being trained in that world and knowing some of what goes into that in order to get a victim to come forward, that's a long game. Right.
Yes.
When police, whether it's a frontline police officer responder, somebody specially trained in doing these investigations, you don't get somebody on your first attempt. I don't come across Natalie and say, Natalie, I believe that you're being trafficked. We need to talk. Natalie's going to shut the door in my face and say, no, I'm not going to talk to you, because you've been trained by your trafficker how to respond to law enforcement, what to say, what not to give them. Right. And that, again, comes with the threats, the coercion, right? The threats of violence. That if you say anything, right? And the biggest thing is building that relationship, and not being forced. But that's the only way that we can start to uncover those real numbers, is starting to get it, because it's a long game to put a trafficker behind bars, to take them off the streets, to stop them, because you need victim cooperation first and foremost. And that's such a tough part. And when we look at the numbers, like, they're through the roof. They're far higher than what they are.
I think something that can kind of help people, I guess, be able to see and understand the level of bond that is formed between a victim and a trafficker is, I always bring it back to vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that's something that we all have. no matter how we were raised, no matter where we live, no matter how much money we make, right? We all have vulnerabilities. The main goal of a trafficker is to identify what your vulnerability is and then figure out how they're going to use that to exploit you, which means that none of
Absolutely.
us are, safe from the possibility of being groomed into the situation. Now, once they find that vulnerability, let's say, for example, maybe it's just a girl that is looking for love, right? We meet people online all the time. It's like normal, right?
Yeah.
To meet people online. Uh, the one of the top ways somebody is recruited is through a lover boy scenario, which is a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You build a bond with that person. And if you have a
Yeah.
lack of love in your life, maybe from your family, or you've been burned by other relationships, and now this person is coming in your life and love bombing you and giving you everything that you need, buying you gifts, providing housing, food, all this stuff, and building this bond with you, we all can understand that, either we've been in a toxic relationship at some point in our lives, or we know somebody who has been, and you're blind to the reality of what you're sitting in
Yeah.
because you love that person.
It's the Romeo,
Um,
right? It's the
yeah,
Romeo scam, right?
yeah,
That somebody comes in and showers you with that love and affection or tells you things, right? Remember an interview with the girl and she was like, he told me he was proud of me. And she's like,
yeah,
I'd never been told by anybody before that they were proud of me.
yeah,
And that was all it took, was
hmm,
that for her to turn over her trust to this individual
yeah,
and then to be trafficked.
yeah. And you had mentioned like some of these films and people's perception of what trafficking looks like, and how a lot of times you're a lot closer to it than you realize.
Yeah.
The top four way recruitment methods that we are seeing as an organization is the lover boy scenario, so being trafficked by a boyfriend or girlfriend, being sold by your family, which any
Yeah.
parent out there can probably not even fathom that, but it happens every day.
Yeah.
Being trafficked by a friend and or a family member, and then answering to false job ads.
Yeah.
These are the
The
things that we're seeing.
the friend one is another interesting, right? And for anybody who's, I'll use Jeffrey Epstein as a story to kind of
Yeah.
paint that picture if people have followed around, right? He would bring in a female victim
Hmm.
and then he would use her to recruit her friends who wanted
Hmm.
to make money.
Yeah.
And that it can happen like that easily, right? Whether, and
Yep.
this girl, they eventually latch onto that one who they can grow in their organization to bring in other people and
Hmm.
grow the number of victims that they have.
For
It's
sure.
wild. It's
Yeah.
wild.
And some people ask, like, how do they even get these people to then start recruiting for them, right?
Yeah.
That person in the industry, that person is called the bottom. The
Yeah.
recruiter is the bottom. That is the padding, the cushion to protect the trafficker from
That's
potentially
right.
getting arrested or charged with trafficking. That bottom, who started out as a victim, can then potentially be caught and charged as a trafficker.
That's
And
right.
that and they started out as a victim.
Yeah.
And that's
There's a lot
that's
of mind manipulation.
yeah, for sure. It is a deep bond that they're forming mentally, emotionally, physically, and that's important to understand, because there people always wonder, like, why can't you just walk away? Why would you? I would never get myself in that situation, like, we think these things, but it's one of those things where it happens without you even realizing it. The
It does.
average
And
age, yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the average age of entry into exploitation is getting younger and younger. So,
Yes. I think it's
you know,
13.
13, it's
Yeah.
13 right now. And just think about how, like, those are formative years of a child's life.
Oh, it's completely will change their trajectory in life where they are going. And so message for parents here, right?
Hmm.
Don't presume and ever assume it could not be happening under your own roof,
Right.
that your child is, you know what, when they're packing up their backpack and saying, I'm going to Natalie's house to go study for this math test I have next week.
Yeah.
Right? That
Yeah.
she could be somehow through school, through friends, through something else being forced into this. But they are so terrified, right? Those threats are so strong
Mm-hmm.
that they just become a different person before your eyes and you don't even know it. But, and I think, you know, we talk to parents, and this is why it's important for employers to know this, and that
Yeah.
to pass this education on to their staff, 1 degree removed, right? It's happening.
Right. Mm-hmm.
People need to understand it. They need to recognize red flags, but then you need to know how to respond if somebody that you know is involved in this, because it can't be accusatory. It can't be, it has to come from such a level of support
Yeah.
that they are willing to open up to you and say, I need help. I'm stuck. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trapped.
Right.
I'm truly, truly trapped.
Yeah.
And it could be to a parent, it could be your child, or it could be a friend's child, or it could be your next door neighbor, right? There's so many
Mm-hmm.
things that people can watch for when it comes to this, you know, beyond, you know, just educating to raise greater awareness, right?
Right.
It's so close. So what do you think, Natalie? What do you think is the biggest challenge then that we face in society today when it comes to creating greater awareness to this or getting more people on board?
Yeah.
This is a daunting topic for people,
It is.
right? It's
It is.
heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But you know what? It doesn't have to be. When you're equipped with resources and information and knowledge, it empowers you to be able to engage in these types of conversations more and more. Like I said, I mean, you said at the beginning, I'm a parent myself. Like, I first heard about human trafficking and I, as a mom, was like freaked out about it, right? But
Yeah.
you have to kind of push past, that a little bit and realize that if you educate yourselves and you receive amazing resources, there are ways that you can navigate these conversations with your kids that are age appropriate. And we offer free resources for parents specifically, but we also offer resources for different professional sectors because we want to come alongside them and understand that there is a way you can have this conversation in the workplace, in your home, in your community, in a healthy, empowering way, right? I think that the hardest challenge is that people think that if they don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. And
Right.
it's not only just still existing, it's growing at a rapid speed. We have
Yes.
access to the world on this little device.
Yeah.
Our kids have access to the world on this little device. If we don't do our due diligence to be able to make sure that we're protecting our employees, we're protecting our families, that we're educating those that we have influence with, we're doing our community a disservice, right? Like it's one of those, and these are all free resources I'm talking about. This is not
Yeah.
for 19.99 you can have this XYZ, right? Like these are free
Right.
resources that are out there, and we're not the only organization that has resources. There's tons of stuff out there now, which is amazing. It's just getting it in people's hands and having them utilize it and implement it into their life.
Right. And it is, you know, it's a problem that it goes beyond. I tell people it's like, if, oh, I read about this one thing in my newspaper and I couldn't believe it was happening in my hometown. I'm like, if you think this is only happening when you read about it in the newspaper or hear about it on your local news station, you are so misinformed about it. And we
Right.
need to create greater awareness, because I'm like, for that one that you heard, it's happening 20, 30, 40 other times, right?
Right.
That you just don't know about. So when we talk about that, right, it's rising rates. It was $150 million, you know, not that long ago, or $150 billion a year industry.
Yeah.
You're saying 230, you know, 235. I'm saying, you know, NASDAQ Verifin was reporting $330 billion, and we know we've talked about it being much higher.
Yeah.
What excites you about the future in combating these issues as we go forward and move forward as a society?
There is so much power in partnership. And that's what I love. I think that just what you and I are doing right now, having this conversation, and we have influence in different sectors. And we are, having a good, honest conversation and figuring out how we can empower our communities more, right? I think that partnership is key in all of this. Like I said, it's not up to one entity or sector to carry the load of fighting this battle. We as an organization know we cannot do it alone. We are working in 14 countries, and in every country we work in, we partner with law enforcement, we partner with local government, we partner with organizations and schools and businesses and the transportation sector and airlines and like so many hospitality sector. We partner with these people because each one of us has unique influence in where we work and live. So
Yeah.
I can't reach the people you can reach and vice versa. So I think that it offers such an opportunity to build a community, to empower more people, to be able to raise awareness and bring education. So that's what I love. And that's what I get to do all the time, right? Is make new friends and help come alongside the work to enhance the work they're already doing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Natalie, where can people find you? This is a topic that we could go for 3 hours on, and we could
For sure.
uncover every layer of human trafficking. And I think it's something we're going to come back to and do more education on it and talk about the specific types and forms of trafficking. But where can people find you at right now for yourself, for A21? And how can people go and make a donation if they want to A21?
For sure. You can find us at a21.org, and you can go to a21.org/give to be able to give. And then I would say if you're wanting to have a further conversation of what does this look like, how can A21 come alongside the work that you're doing, email info@a21.org. Because no matter what it is, our team is going to point you in the right direction, get you connected with the right team member to support you. So info@a21.org, you can send your information or maybe a question that you have, and our team will be quick to respond.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I want to give you a huge thank you for coming on here, for talking about this. Your knowledge is so valuable to anybody listening. And I know this is a heavy topic for a lot of people, but don't shy away from it. Just, sometimes we got to burst the bubble a little bit and say, this is happening.
Yeah.
And collectively we can come together, right? From, with us with Pursuit Pathways, if you're an organization that's doing any of our workplace violence training or education or other forms of exploitation that we provide, we do educate on these topics as well to help you build greater awareness. A21 is one of our charitable contributions that we give back to. And it's something that we need to continue to spread the word. And if, it's cliche, but if for every one person I tell, if they can tell 3 more, and we can just build that, and it's going to compound and we're going to get it out there, right? Every person you can save, either prevent from falling into the hands of the trafficker or removing them. It's a huge win. So for those listening, if you learned something today, if you loved it, please tell somebody about our podcast. Please share it. Natalie, thank you again for coming on here and contributing to it. I appreciate it. This has been another episode of Shield the Vulnerable, Untold Stories, and we will see you next time.